College was not my thing. I tried it 4 times. I just couldn't do it. I hated it. When I got into this position and I became a top producer, you start making a lot of money at that time. Non-degreed girl making what I thought at the time was a lot of money, but I'm miserable at the job. I felt like I had golden handcuffs on, like I couldn't leave. When you're reinventing yourself, I think sometimes people think that they can't do that, but like you can. You can reinvent yourself as many times as you want to. It's you. If you don't like something about yourself, change it.
There was this business owner and he was like complaining about like the lack of quality candidates. And I was like, bro, what are you talking about?
When you're wanting really top talent, you have to be headhunted out of those roles. They're not going to apply to positions.
Obviously, there's a lot of misinformation about your resume. There's some things that maybe some myths that people think of. Should you have your picture on your resume? We all want to use the Canva templates because they look great.
Stop
but like
using Canva templates. You got to keep it simple. They're not looking to go through a bunch of like, you've got some information over here, some information over here, all scattered in different color fonts. When people will send me theirs and will say like professional summary, there's been multiple times in 12 years that I've actually had hiring managers say, yeah, we're going to pass on that resume. When you talk to the most successful people, they always mention God. The most successful people have faith. They just do. You know, even walking into this podcast, I prayed in the car. You know, God, please help guide and lead me through your words. It's just something that, you know, I lean on because it helps me feel taken care of. It helps me feel like seen. And it reminds me that I'm doing this for, you know, a lot of reasons that are much bigger than what most people do these things for.
All right, well, y'all, welcome to another episode of the Blueprint Podcast. We have Miss SarahEnglade with Monarch Talent Solutions in the building. We've already done a brief intro, so people kind of know a little bit about what they're going to get. But why don't you just quickly introduce us, to people who don't know you, give us a little more detail about you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm SarahEnglade. I'm the owner-founder of Monarch Talent Solutions. I am an executive headhunter specializing here in Houston, specifically in accounting, finance, HR, for direct hire placements.
So good. Man, that's how you do an elevator pitch, ladies and gentlemen. She's got it down. I love it. I really just want to jump straight into it because this is honestly a hot topic that I think is going to touch a lot of people on a personal level. We've all been in situations where we've been, either laid off, fired, or looking for a better opportunity, and it's just tough, right? And this year particularly, there's a lot going on. We have an election year, we have the economy, we have high inflation, interest rates. It's just a big storm, all at one time. So this has been a lot of tough things happening. But I noticed something really interesting that I want to get your feedback on. So I was on Facebook the other day and there was this business owner and he was like complaining about like the lack of quality candidates. And I was like, bro, what are you talking about? Because on LinkedIn, it's like the complete opposite. Like everyone's complaining. Nobody's emailing me back. I'm applying to 50 jobs a day and can't even get an interview. And I was like, so like what is happening between these business owners and the LinkedIn world? Like what's happening? Like why are we not getting these placements?
I feel like, okay, this is my opinion on this, right? So if you're hearing it on Facebook, a lot of those people aren't on LinkedIn. And then if you're hearing it on LinkedIn, they're not looking for their jobs on Facebook. And so a lot of the time, like what we're going through right now is if you're looking for strong top talent, those folks, they're not quitting. They're not quitting their job because they see the economy, they see the risk, they don't want to be unemployed. And so they're not even really passively looking. When you're wanting really top talent, you have to be headhunted out of those roles. They're not going to apply to positions. So, you really have to look for a headhunter to help. But a lot of people are scared to make a move right now. So if they're scared to make a move, then we can't backfill their positions. Companies aren't really creating new roles. So those, roles would normally attract people to apply. It's not happening. So everyone's a little freaked out. That's what's going on. And I also think, too, there's a lot, and this is just my opinion on this, but a lot of people don't want to work. That's a whole nother thing that's going on. Like since the pandemic, mind shifts have happened, right? Like even in my space, in the accounting space, 300,000 accountants did not come back to work after the pandemic. They just sat at home and was like, I hate my life as an accountant. I'm going to change jobs. So they just left. And so now, with that, there's a lot of mind shift. People came back from the pandemic. They don't want to be on site 5 days a week. Like they actually know what makes them happy. They want to be happy at their job. So there's a lot of people too that, they're not all in anymore. They know they have options. A lot of people went the entrepreneurial route. So I think it's just really hard finding people that really do truly want to work for companies, especially if the companies aren't really showcasing like strong culture, flexibility, and the things that actually matter in today's world.
Yeah. Okay, that's so good. And I want to come back to that culture piece and how companies can kind of position themselves. But I think there's also something that you mentioned to me when we talked before was kind of you called it like the white collar recession.
Yeah.
So I want you to kind of go into that and kind of what does that mean for job seekers? And that might have been kind of what you just described. But also kind of break down, like, is there a difference in even maybe from the salary level? Maybe like people making under a certain amount, maybe there's more jobs in that category.
Yeah.
Or the people you're talking about, are those like high earners that are just kind of sitting, kind of what is the demographic there?
So I did not coin the phrase white collar recession. Business Insider did.
Okay.
And so, I was wondering the same thing a while back. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? So because in my space that I specialize in, the people that I place are all high earners. So
Okay.
everyone's making over 120 to, really up to like 400,000 to 500,000 a year.
Okay.
So in that space, there's just not a lot of new jobs. There's just not. Because again, like a lot of the times those folks that are making that much money, CFOs, they see what's going on with the health of the company financially. So they're holding tight. They're not going to quit their job.
Right.
They're not doing that. And there's just not a lot of CFOs that are willing to leave a job right now. And so, that's just one space there. So, anyone basically making over 120K would be considered, even like 100K, we'll start there. That's really where you're going to fall in as a high earner.
Okay.
There's just not a lot of positions open right now. However, on the flip side to that, positions paying 55K and below are hot.
Okay.
There's a lot of those positions. And so a lot of those positions would be maybe an entry level role, but really they're more like labor positions or trade positions. If you're getting into like plumbing, electrical, like we need those people. So there's still a lot of those jobs going on. They're really hot. But again, like with everything that's changed, a lot of the time, like even entry-level electricians are making a ton of money because they're so highly sought after. So there's just so much change going on there. But the white-collar recession's been going on since 2023. It's probably going to be going on. If I could predict the future, after doing this for 12 years, I would say we're probably going to be dealing with this until Q2 of 2025.
Okay, gotcha. And like, what do you think is going to be the turn in that tide? Is that tide? I know interest rates have an impact on the job market in terms of companies having capital to, expand, hire. Is that like you anticipating with the change in interest rate that will trickle down into the job market and that will kind of kick us out of that in 2025?
Yeah, I hope so. So we got to get through the election. So that's the biggest. So being in this, and I know I shared this with you before, like I'm an old pro at this. Any election year, the year before, we're prepping for this. We know it's going to be really, really slow because people are freaked out and companies are holding on to their purse strings. They're running exceptionally lean. They're trying to figure out what new policies are going to really impact them. And this year is really confusing too because there's high inflation. So there's high, obviously, to interest rates. So there's the interest rates, the inflation affecting companies. Companies are trying to protect their people. They're trying to keep their people. So they can't hire right now. So we've got to have some kind of change. So with the election, let's get through it. It doesn't matter who wins, regardless of what side you're on. We just got to get through it. Once we get through it, hopefully then we start seeing, and we've already, I think, started seeing interest rates are coming down. So that's a great sign. So the more that they come down and the more inflation settles, the better everyone's going to be. And the job market will start to really warm up. Okay,
so we're kind of in a holding pattern. I feel like that on the real estate side. I'm definitely sensing that people are kind of like, they want to do some stuff, but they're kind of just kind of waiting. And people are like waiting for obviously the interest rate to start dropping. So obviously we're seeing that. So I think that's obviously kind of getting people like revved up and kind of looking for opportunity. And then obviously with the election, like you said, I think people are kind of waiting to see what's going to happen.
They're freaked out.
Even though I think that's kind of, like you said, that's kind of more so a perception thing, more so than an actual reality. Okay, how is your life going to actually change in the immediate impact of the election? Not very much.
No.
And obviously, I think there will be changes, policy changes. Those are going to take a while to kick in anyway.
Right.
So in terms of like, if you're looking for like, hey, I need a job in the next 6 months or a year, or I need a house in the next 6 months or a year, your life isn't really going to change based off of the election.
No, it's not. I know. And I think that if like the media could just stop playing so much into this, like I was thinking about this the other day. It's like growing up, I got to see the news. Like the news was actually like the actual news. Like we got to see what's going on like in Houston and like different events and this and that. And now all it is just TV for politics. And it's like if they could just get that under control, I think companies would be, they wouldn't feel so scared. People wouldn't feel so scared. There's just a lot of noise and it's distracting. And unfortunately, the noise that we are all hearing is also negative. So it's just like if that could change, if we could just turn off the television and get off social media, the job market would probably be like, bring.
Interesting. That is so interesting.
I think that.
Yeah. Okay.
Scary.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of social media, LinkedIn is probably a big piece of your business,
It is
obviously.
the biggest
Like,
piece. Yeah.
yeah. So talk about that. I think you mentioned that that's your breadwinner, right? Where that's where you're getting the placement. So kind
Yeah.
of talk about the power of LinkedIn. And I'll be really vulnerable with you guys. I'm in real estate now, but like earlier this year, I was about to quit on entrepreneurship. I was like, this sucks. This is hard. Like I've been at the grind. I'm doing everything everyone's telling me to do, and it's not really turning out the way I really wanted it to. And so I started looking for like, full-time jobs, right? And when I tell you like my mental health was like in the dirt, it was just like
Yeah.
working so hard. I mean, I was watching all the YouTube videos, all the TikToks, doing all the tweaks to my resume, doing all the things, and it was just like nothing was working, right? And then I even reached out to a headhunter like yourself, right? And was working with them. And that was honestly a saving grace for me because that person was so good at just encouraging
Yeah.
me, helping guide me to the right direction. Like, hey, I see that you're applying for these jobs. Hey, I actually think you're really better for this position, and here's why. And explaining to me my own value that I didn't even know, right? I was like, oh, cool. Like, I'm more of this. Okay, cool. That makes sense, right?
Yep.
That's why I wasn't getting interviews, right?
Yep.
So those things were just like super valuable to me, and so would love for you to kind of just add some value, specifically on kind of LinkedIn. Like, how can someone position themselves to be able to get attracted to the right position?
Get on LinkedIn. Like
Okay.
that's
There
where
you
you
go.
get to start, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, I teach actually, so once a month I actually go to Dress for Success in Houston, and I speak to women and helping them
Mhm.
get and break back into the job market, because everything has changed and we rely
Mhm.
so much on social media for everything, and
Okay.
LinkedIn is that platform for us.
Right.
So for professionals, you can't utilize it the same way you would utilize a Facebook or an Instagram. It is the complete opposite, but you have to start by utilizing it and
Okay.
optimizing the profile.
Okay.
And so, there's a lot of statistics that are out. Like, if you don't even have a profile picture up,
Mhm.
you're not even going to really get viewed. I think you get viewed 11 times less
Okay.
without even like a profile picture.
Yeah.
It's like the simple things like that.
Okay.
But you have to get onto LinkedIn and you have to start making connections with strangers. Like, your
Mhm.
first interaction with people is a cold outreach
Okay.
because you haven't gotten them to pay attention to or accept your request to connect with them. But
Mhm.
then it becomes warm once they're in your network. You don't have to go pitching to them right away that you're looking for a job. It's a
Mhm.
total turn off. It makes
Okay.
you look over eager, but you can just say, hey, simply, like, thank you so much for accepting my request to connect with you. It's great having you in my network. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you in the future. Leave
Okay.
it at that. A day or two later, reach back out to them. Say, hey, this is what I actually specialize in,
Mm.
or this is the situation that I'm in, looking for an opportunity. Do you by any chance have opportunities open with your company? And if you don't, do you have any leads with others?
Okay.
And if they say no, what I was taught, I have an executive coach. My executive coach was like, listen, you know, there's actually 11 touch points in
Mm.
sales. And when
Okay.
you're finding a job for yourself, it is sales. You're
Okay.
selling yourself.
Right.
It is true.
Yeah.
And so she was like, Sarah, listen, like, you're not annoying people. So I think people on LinkedIn are afraid to post. They're
Mhm.
afraid of being judged
Yeah.
because it's so hard to work that algorithm. Like, no one likes your post for a really long time. And
Yeah.
so, people are afraid of the judgment. They're afraid of posting. They're afraid of reaching out, coming
Mhm.
across over desperate, all the things. But you've got to start somewhere.
Okay.
And so if I can tell anybody, you have to be visible. Everyone goes on LinkedIn. When you're applying to a job, they're literally pulling your resume, looking at your name, and on LinkedIn to find you.
Ah. Okay.
So it all has to connect. And if so, you're struggling, make a presence for yourself,
Okay.
build a professional brand on LinkedIn. It takes time, but do it.
Right. Okay. And on the flip side to that, like for let's say the business owners, because we mentioned
Uh-huh.
at the beginning of the episode, like the business owner who's trying to find somebody, maybe they're looking for that entry level position and they're just like, we can't find anybody. How can they make themselves more discoverable or attractive to the right candidate on LinkedIn?
It's kind of the same thing. Like, so
Okay.
when you're a hiring manager, you're attached to a company. If
Okay.
your company is not visible on LinkedIn, like, you haven't optimized the company page and started to
Mhm.
post on that, like, that's a little bit less important. But what do we always do when we're looking people up or looking companies up to check on credibility? Like,
Mhm.
we Google them or we go to
Yeah.
their page, we try to find information on them.
Okay.
And so what you want to do is make sure that they're posting, like, you post the things that you're proud about with your company, like events that you're a part of, maybe organizations that you're donating to, like, different things that you're doing for the company culture. Like,
Mhm.
are you going out to like the Astros games? Are you doing this? Are you doing award ceremonies? Like,
Mhm.
announcing people's promotions? Like, people want to work for companies that are attractive in that way.
Right.
Give off good vibes and all that.
Yeah.
So if you're not building a good brand, and reputation is everything. So if you're
Okay.
not even willing to build your brand on LinkedIn, but the word out in the street is that you have high turnover and that you're not the greatest place to work, you're hurting yourself. So
Okay.
you've got to kind of listen to the feedback on exit interviews. You've got to
Yeah,
build a brand
absolutely.
for yourself, for your company, but you also, as the leader and as the hiring manager, should be active
Okay.
on LinkedIn,
Okay.
commenting, posting, connecting, all the things.
Okay, got you. So just to kind of recap, so for the person who's looking for the job, it's like obviously have your profile optimized, which I think most people who are serious about a job have that checked down, right? Most people are like, yeah, got it, already doing that. I think you said the first outreach should be something a little bit warm,
Yeah,
just kind
just
of a
warm.
brief, you know what I mean? A couple days later, follow up with a little bit more targeted, specific. Hey, this is what I'm looking for.
Yep.
Like you're looking for, like at that point, you're looking for the yes or the no, essentially, right? Do they have something for you or do they not, right?
Yep.
And then from there, what happens, right? Because I think that's where I think a lot of people might feel frustrated, or like, hey, like what happens after I have done the initial outreach? That kind of where you have any kind of thoughts in terms of maybe what employers are looking for when it
Yeah.
comes to what people are doing online?
Well, I can tell you what I do because I feel like a professional job seeker. I
Yeah.
mean, I run my own company. If I don't have a job to fill, like I'm technically unemployed, I guess.
Yeah.
There's no revenue coming in. And so that's really scary. So, the things that I do is normally when I am reaching out to a new person, I'll send them a connect request, but I do not write a note in there.
Okay.
I don't, because every time I get a note, you know what I get?
Yeah.
Oh, we have like similar contacts or similar connections, or, oh, I see you like Tony Robbins. And I'm like,
Everybody, like, yeah.
Yeah, like I'm like, that's like, you took, like, what is that? That's not
Yeah.
creative. And so it's just safer to not leave like a note in there,
Yeah.
in my opinion. But once the person accepts, I usually wait 24 hours. I send them that simple, like, 1 to 2 sentence, thanks for accepting. And then the next day, I won't ask them for anything. About like 1 to 2 days later, I'll actually just reach back out to you and say, hey, outside of being a headhunter, I actually create content too, and helping like the city of Houston job seekers and hiring managers to really navigate this market. Here's some blogs. Like I actually made a blog recently, and if you wouldn't mind like letting me know which content piece struck you as interesting, I'd really appreciate that for moving forward. So you give them a little bit of value, and then if it's a job seeker, you might want to bring them value, like, hey, like, I saw we're in the same industry, and I actually was, you can bring up something that you have in common. Even the whole, like, oh, I saw you graduated, U of H. I did too, So you have to find something in common. Just say, I just thought that was interesting. I'm glad that we got connected. Leave it at that. People are weird, like you're a stranger reaching out to them. So you can't ask people for something right away, but I switch it up. No joke, no lie. You can pull their email address too from LinkedIn, but I'll send a voice memo on LinkedIn. I'll send an email. I'll send a Loom video too, because you can do a Loom video, like that's super personalized.
Yeah.
They will respond.
Okay.
Like they usually do. Like people will a lot of the time be like, I didn't even know you could leave a little voice memo.
Yeah,
like they had no idea.
Yeah,
So they
I had somebody leave me a voice message on LinkedIn, and I was like, "Wait, you can do this?"
Yep.
That's my strategy on
From
Instagram.
your mobile, yeah.
Yeah, I'll send a voice message on Instagram, and I'll send a like a video. Like I'll just do a quick selfie video, and I'll typically put their name on like on the text, and that always gets a response. Like, oh my god, you went out of your way to kind of personalize it for me, and like you said, like they've never really seen it before, and so it's always it always catches their attention.
There was a guy that I had been following on LinkedIn for a little bit. I couldn't help him. He was in the HR space. He had been looking for a job for a while, and I tried helping him. I wasn't successful in placing him, but this guy really was a perfect example of what to do. He got on LinkedIn every single day, and he made video content. He posted it, and he was talking about the market. He was talking about some of the interviews that he had, where he was at in the process, things that he really took away from it, like the value that he walked away from. Even being rejected, he shared his story, and now he got based right when he started doing that content, and no joke, he started getting people to pay attention to him, and he got a job offer, and it's like, and I talked to him last week. He's like, this is the best job I've ever had in my entire life, and I really do think, and I credit the content piece once I started video.
Yeah, man, that's so good. Yeah, and I think I think LinkedIn is a little bit behind the eight ball when it comes to video content. I think now they have the little short form feed now.
Yeah,
so now they're making it easier for you to even actually create content on LinkedIn. So, and I think, like, what is your opinion between the difference between the personal brand and the professional brand? Because I think when it comes to the TikToks of the world, the Facebooks, I think people get it when you're like, hey, build your personal brand. That may not necessarily always translate to what a professional brand on LinkedIn. Is that the same? Or could I show up the same way on Instagram that I show up on LinkedIn and still make the same impact?
I don't know. Like, that's a great question. So I think one of the biggest compliments that I always get when I am recognized
Mm-hmm.
going to HR events here in Houston or accounting events here in Houston, people have been following me for a few years now.
Yeah.
And the biggest compliment I will get is, Sarah, you are exactly who you are online as you are in person. And
Yeah.
that's what I want. So for
Right.
me, I'm a huge advocate of having the same brand. Like, and what I mean by that is being yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like really being yourself. If you're gonna make I had a conversation with a girlfriend recently, and she was talking to me about having like a separate persona for
Mm-hmm.
business. She's like, I've been told by some people that are really successful, like who they are online is not who they are in person. Well, that would be really confusing, I think, over
Mm-hmm.
time, even with your mental health kind of messing
Yeah.
with you. So for me, I don't know. I think that if you're willing to build yourself a brand and put yourself out there, you should do it confidently as yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
People like you for being you.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's my
being
advice.
authentic. I think so. I think the answer I just heard is to be authentic. Just be
Yes.
yourself. And yeah, I will say I'm one of those people. Like I think I followed you for like over a year, like a year and a half maybe, and just kind of just saw you consistently showing up on Instagram
Yeah.
and like showing up. And then eventually I was like, okay, hey, now it makes sense. Hey, I'm looking for my next podcast guest, and you're like top of mind. Like, okay, hey, I need to do something for my community who's looking for jobs because I started noticing just a lot of people on my own network were just like every conversation somebody's bringing it
Yeah.
up, and I was like, okay, this is a pain point. Who do I know that can solve that pain point? Boom, Sarah. Right?
See that? Yeah.
So
The
that's what
power of like
happens.
social media.
Yeah.
Like it's awesome.
Yeah, and so I think that's what I would challenge somebody if you're struggling to, get a job. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're in healthcare, oil and gas, you work for this, the city. Create content, right? But create content that is intentional, that's actually trying to solve problems and add value to people. And that is honestly like you gotta just experiment with that.
You
Like, there's
do.
no way to really find like what is the thing. And I found that too with this podcast. I mean, we've been experimenting with different topics, different styles. Some hit, some don't, right?
Yep. You never know.
Yeah, like my,
Yeah.
my best episode was with one of the best episodes that we got the most feedback was with my dad. And I didn't think that one was gonna do well at
That's
all. I was like, this is
awesome.
me and my dad talking, right? And people were like, oh my god, yo, we loved hearing about your life. And it was authentic. And I think I showed up way more authentic because I was with my dad.
You're
So like,
comfortable.
yeah, I'm way
Yeah.
more comfortable than I was like a random person I just met, right? And so I think it showed up that way. And I was like, oh, okay, so how can we learn to be more authentic
Yep.
online? That comes with practice.
It
So,
does.
yeah.
I think even with me in the beginning, I was super scared. I had
Yeah.
never even used LinkedIn until I started my own company. And then I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I've got to build this brand. I've got to commit to this. And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
super terrifying because you're going out professionally. You're
Mhm.
there as your professional self, and you want to be liked and you want to
Right.
be accepted.
Okay.
And then nobody likes your posts.
Mhm.
And the ones that you like spent the most time on, like that you think are just gonna pop off, they don't.
Mhm.
They fall flat. And you're like, what the
Right.
heck was that? But you can't let that bother you because those are all learning experience. Don't erase them. Don't delete them. Keep them up.
Mhm.
And like I go back and read some of my original content, and to be honest, some of them it makes me cringe.
Mhm.
But other ones I'm like, man, that was so good because that is exactly how I felt back then, and I can feel myself writing that and posting that.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of good that comes out of it. But if you're going to
Okay.
create content as a job seeker, you've got to create content for your buyers, and your
Mhm.
buyers are the people that could offer you a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. I love that. And I think the thing that I also want to encourage people with is there's like multiple different ways to create on LinkedIn specifically. You can do a newsletter on LinkedIn, guys.
Yep.
So if you're a copywriter, you like to write, that also shows up well on Facebook. So if you're gonna post like written format on LinkedIn, I would just like reformat and put it on Facebook as well. It's the kind of similar style of how people engage with it. You have your video, right? Which I already said you can either do short form or you can do more long form. You can do a Zoom video, you can do a Loom, and those can either go on your actual feed or you can send those in the DMs. And those are great ways to just add value. So if you're like, I don't know what to say when I DM them, like really go like look at someone's page and create some content based off what you saw on their page.
100%. That's
Right?
it. That's
Yeah.
it.
So those are three like really simple ways that you could do 30 minutes a week or an hour a week. Just do something like that. If you're looking for a job, similar for if you're a company looking to hire, like create content that you think your ideal candidate would want to be attracted to, right?
That's right.
And I would say do it from an authentic standpoint, like what we said, because I see a lot of companies that do very professional branded looking content that just looks very like it's like a stock photo. You know what I
is.
mean? I'm like, okay, you guys got that off of like Photoshop or something. Like that's
Yeah.
not a real person. Like they don't work for you. Like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
and it gets like it really gets beat up. Those pieces of content too now with AI,
Mhm.
like the comments. If you read a lot of the commentary on those posts, they'll be like, "Thanks AI,
Yeah.
thanks for putting this together. This isn't even real." So it's
Yeah.
like people can read right through the BS and they can see right through it. So you
Yeah.
really do. If you're gonna do it, do it right.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so let's kind of jump back into some really practical training to kind of help some people. So we've talked about LinkedIn. We've talked about building your brand, creating content. Talk about the person who has maybe gone through the layoff, gotten fired, gone through, kind of gotten knocked down, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can they reinvent themselves? I know it's kind of part of your story, so I'd love for you to kind of share your story and kind of talk about like how you kind of reinvented yourself after kind of a really challenging experience.
Yeah. Well, so I was fired.
Mm-hmm.
So I was with a company as a top producer, and I was really, really good at that job.
Okay. Was it
And
sales or?
it was sales. It
Okay.
was recruiting. It was my first recruiting job.
Okay.
I was there for 6.5 years. They gave me the foundation. They taught me everything to, be successful as a recruiter, all the
Right.
things that were necessary. But they also taught me all the things that I would never want to do if I was running my own firm.
Mm-hmm.
It was an exceptionally toxic environment. And so one thing, I don't know if you know this about me, is that I don't have a college degree. So
Okay.
college was not my thing. I tried it 4 times, and I just couldn't do it. I hated it. So when I got into this position and I became a top producer, it takes a while to get to that level in recruiting or in sales in general.
Okay.
You start making a lot of money at that time. So non-degreed girl making what I thought at the time was a lot of money, but I'm miserable at the job.
Okay.
I felt like I had golden handcuffs on, like I couldn't leave.
Okay.
Because I was insecure, and that's really how I felt back then. I was insecure not having the degree and wondering if I was ever going to make that kind of money working for someone else.
Okay.
So being miserable, knowing that I was not well liked by leadership, I ended
Is
up
that
getting
like a personality thing or like?
yeah,
just-
it was.
yeah.
It was 100% personality.
Okay.
Like I became a shell of who I really was because I always felt like I was in defense mode constantly.
Okay.
I was always being, hey, do you have a minute to walk off the floor? You have a minute? You have a minute? I'm like, what is this now? Like,
Yeah.
I felt like I couldn't do anything right towards the end. And so I became unapproachable. I didn't trust anybody.
Wow.
So even though I was still like doing an amazing job, people were scared of me, I think. So they were trying to find reasons to fire me. And so they did. They found a reason. I told a girl at happy hour I didn't want to be her friend on a Thursday, and I got fired for that on a Tuesday.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember being like, this is the stupidest excuse. You
Yeah.
could have came up with a better one, but
Yeah.
okay. And I really thank them for it because in the time, I felt so much relief even in that moment because they fired me from a job I was unable to quit on my own.
Wow.
So it was not really all that painful for me. It was like, okay, I feel free. I felt so light walking out with my box of 6.5 years of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was an instant mode for me that like I went home and I'm a recruiter. So what do we teach our network or our people that we partner with is to lean into your network. And so I was sent home by 2 p.m. that day and I immediately got home and I didn't really give myself time to digest, which is what I would really actually say if somebody's in the situation that I was in getting fired, give yourself a moment to work through it.
Okay.
Because what happened with me is I leaned into my network and I lined up interviews. I had 6 job offers in 2 weeks from being fired.
Wow.
I had to keep saying over and over when they would ask, like, why are you looking for a job? Well, I was fired. I was fired. And they would be, oh. And in my industry, it's a small world. So they all were like, you've got to be kidding me. And like, we, and a lot of them just knew the company too. So I got a lot of grace. Got in with a new company and that company was not the right fit for me. And I knew within 3 hours, my first day sitting at lunch with leadership, I was like, what have I done?
Oh, no.
So this company was the complete opposite, but it actually was a really great experience for me because it allowed me to work through the PTSD that I never allowed myself to work through. Being fired is very traumatizing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is traumatizing. And I didn't realize how traumatizing it was until I actually really started to allow myself to feel the feels. It's like breaking up with someone that you really love and care for that treated you bad. You go through the whole relief, but then you start going through like the anger and the betrayal feeling, like the what the heck was that? And then you get through like, okay, well that was meant to be. I'm glad it happened. And then it's still like I'm angry.
Yeah.
So you go through the waves of it, which is super healthy to go through, but really hard to go through.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the second company gave me so much grace and like they gave me my wings back. So as chaotic as that company was and as much as it didn't make sense for me to stay there, they really gave me life.
Okay.
They did. And I was so grateful for them. But then the pandemic hit and I got laid off because I'm a recruiter and there were no jobs. So I, within, 2 days of being laid off, I Googled how do you start a company, and I started a company, and I had never dreamt of starting a company. I don't have entrepreneurial blood. I don't have any mentors to look up to in my family for this, but I was like, okay, this is time for me to go in. So you have to be able to allow yourself to go through the feelings. Everything that happens to you really does. It's hard in the moment to see what it could lead to, but you really do have to allow yourself to work through it.
Okay.
So, being fired, it happens to tons of people. It's actually not taboo. It's not abnormal.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people were fired? Wasn't Oprah fired? Like, there's like a bunch of like these big wig names that were all fired. And now look at them, right?
Right.
So it's not abnormal. I just think people think it is, because if you've been fired, you must really stink at your job.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sometimes it can be political. Sometimes it can be personality. And sometimes in my case, it's they didn't like me and I didn't like them. Yeah. And a decision had to be made, and they made that decision for me, and I'm so grateful for it now.
Absolutely.
When you're reinventing yourself, I think sometimes people think that they can't do that, but like you can reinvent yourself as many times as you want to. It's you.
Right.
It's your life. If you don't like something about yourself, change it.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the biggest thing is I think people get, stuck in their feelings, and the biggest thing is with me, I get knocked down all the time as a business owner. That's part of owning a business. It's not easy. People like to think it is because Instagram makes it look that way. It's hard.
Yeah.
So you constantly get knocked in the face, and you fall, but you can allow yourself to sit in pain for like a second, but it's about getting back up real fast.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so good. Thank you so much for sharing that. I felt the authenticity, the passion from you in that, and I think it's one of those things where it goes back to our identity as humans, where we derive our identity from when it comes to reinventing ourselves. Because, I can definitely feel how if you get fired, it's like, oh, you weren't good at your job, or you're not good enough. And like we internalize that. 100%. And sometimes, if you deserve to be fired, like obviously there could be like, hey, there might be character flaws, something that you need to work on yourself. But also at the same time, like being able to look at myself and be like, or whoever's listening to this and be like, hey, like, this isn't an indication of who I am as a human. And that's something that honestly, like I've learned through entrepreneurship too, is like, hey, I have to be able to derive my identity from within, because if I'm looking at my identity based off of how good I am at my job or what results I can get, it's just, you're just on a roller coaster, right? And you're just waiting for the next pandemic, the next layoff, the next thing, the next day where you come in and have it in it, and just it all falls apart, right? So that's something that, the Lord has really been teaching me is like, hey, like I want you to find your identity from within yourself, right? Because a friend asked me that the other day, and I started telling him, like, yeah, so who are you? Like, what is it that you're about? Like, what's your one thing? And I started describing all the things I do for people. I was like, dude, I'm a connector, bro. And like, I connect people, and like, I help promote people, and I help people's business grow. And I'm like, all these things I do for everybody else, right? He's thinking, but what about you? And I was like, hold on, let me think about that real quick.
That's a hard one. You get stumped with it because we are so used to like what we do, like what our job is. Like, are we a mom or a dad or a wife or a husband, sister, brother, friend, whatever. Like we identify those things, but sometimes we get lost like in ourselves. Like, who really are we? I struggle with that too sometimes. Still when I get asked that question, I'm like, come back to me on that. Yeah, I'm still searching for that.
Yeah, and there's one thing for me that it's so cool. This is actually one of my, I love sharing this story, and I've shared it a couple times on my Instagram already. My favorite building in Houston is Williams Tower. You know where that's at in Galleria? Ever since I moved to Houston, I keep looking at that tower, and I'm like, bro, I freaking love that tower. Like, I want to have an office in that tower. And I never really understood, like, why I loved it. And after I started really doing some self-reflection, I started realizing why I like it. And so the reason I like it is because Williams Tower is, like, the only skyscraper in that area, right? There are, like, downtown is kind of to your west, and then there's other buildings around, but it's like the big, and it kind of stands alone. You see it, it's like it's the only one, right? It stands out, and it has this little light at the top at night. I don't know if you see, it's kind of a little lighthouse. And like that's who I want to be. Like I want to be a lighthouse. Like I want to help guide people, and I want to be able to stand out, right? And so like it is beautiful. Like I almost cried the other day. I was like, oh my god, I know who I am now. Like, but like it was like every time I see that building, it reminds me, hey, that's who I want to be, right? And I want to be the person who can like stand alone. I don't need to have other skyscrapers around me to validate that I'm a big, strong building, right? And so that's something that like, it came with asking the question. It came with going through hard things. It came with me being fired as an entrepreneur. I got fired by clients before, right? And just being like, oh, does that mean I'm a bad person? You know what I mean? It's like, no, that's not true. Like whatever they said about me wasn't who I am, right? It was just a situation that happened, right? And so that's something I would challenge people is like, hey, if you've gone through a layoff, you're currently looking for a job, not able to find one, like go find something visceral, like something that you can see every day that's going to remind you, hey, this is who I am. And sometimes you got to just hold on to that. That's all you got.
Yeah.
You have to hold on to that.
You're so right about that.
Yeah.
It's funny. My favorite building is the Heritage Building in like on Bagby in downtown.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but I freaking love that building. In fact, like I had like branding shoots and I'm like, please make sure that building is in the back. Like I want that building. I don't know if it's because I see myself in that building maybe later on. I used to actually have a lot of clients in that building. And that was like the building that I loved to go to.
Yeah.
But it doesn't remind me of me outside of like, it's just a really amazing, you know, high rise in downtown. And I guess I attach that to success.
Yeah, I love that. Okay.
Yeah,
I need to go look at that. I don't know if I can picture that building, so I'm definitely going to go look that one up.
Oh, it's the best one. I swear, I promise. It's the best one. The top of the building is just so unique, and it's just...
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, okay.
I love it. Yeah, it's like, it is every time when I think of downtown, that's literally the tower that I think of.
Okay, I love that. So is there anything else really practical that you would want to share that someone who's in the job search, job hunt really kind of needs to be thinking about? Obviously, there's a lot of misinformation about your resume and keywords.
There's a lot of
and you shared some of that with me that was like actually encouraging to me. So like, what are some things that maybe some myths that people think of, like, you know, should you have a bio at the top of your resume, or should you have your picture on your resume? I actually found out that a lot of the systems don't like having your picture on there because it'll kick it out, because it's like, you know, like, so like don't put your picture, don't have colors. Like we all want to use the Canva templates because they look great.
Stop
but like
using Canva templates.
Yeah.
I know, I see a lot of them too. You know, the resume is simple. You got to keep it simple. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, one, hiring managers are looking for keywords. Like they're looking for like the meat and the potatoes. They're not looking to go through a bunch of like, you've got some information over here, some information over here, all scattered in different color fonts, different size fonts, different kind of fonts. My resumes are simple, simple, simple. I actually erase when people will send me theirs and will say like professional summary. There's been multiple times in 12 years that I've actually had hiring managers say, yeah, we're going to pass on that resume. Did you even read the summary? All the grammatical errors. And then they put that they're detail oriented. Like there's no way they are. Look, it's an example that they lied. And I'm like, oh man, I should have caught that. But then the truth is that they know who they would be hiring. So I erase them. I never ever have a professional summary.
No summary. Okay, not even like 1 or 2 lines? Okay.
No, unless it's already pre-written and I ran it through Grammarly and it's like perfect, then I'll keep it. But I don't like them. So I take them off. I will put core competencies and like put some specific skills that are really important that are on job descriptions, like your keywords. But
I put those separately from like, okay, obviously you have like your job title and then you get like, you know, the things that you did at that job. Do you put those keywords in those lines, or is it like a separate section where you just
I'll do it sometimes too. So like for I'll use accounting as an example. So you know, at the top of your resume, so what I'll start with is your name and then your contact information. This is actually really important. So before we get into that, you want to put your city and state. You don't want to put your full address. And no more. Your full address is not needed on a resume. It's weird. We live in a sketch world. Nobody really needs to know where you live, okay? Just like if you even live in Sugar Land, you can put Greater Houston. Like you don't need to just put things like that. So Greater Houston, your phone number, your email address, which should be something simple like SarahEnglade at yahoo.com, something like that. Not like the, you know, crazy ones. I don't even want to say them. Like anything raunchy, get it out. You know, like we all know what they are. Like no. You're looking for a job you want to be taken seriously. And then you do have to include the URL to your LinkedIn now. That is part of your contact information. Right underneath that, I'll usually put a skills section and I'll do the keywords like bank reconciliations, balance sheets, financial reporting, all those things that we know that are in the job description that you're applying to that you have experience in. And then you kind of put them in. I mean, if you did them, you have to include them because that's the biggest thing too. LinkedIn is a keyword driven platform.
Right.
So we're looking you up as headhunters and hiring managers. We have the professional tool for LinkedIn. So when we're able to pull up people, we are literally putting in those keywords. So if you don't have them on your resume, you're not pulling up. So that's something that you really need to consider. But I think as a new job seeker too, the resume is the first thing. It's the first impression. So it's got to be clean. Take your picture off. Stop putting references upon request. We all know that. That's an obvious. You don't need to put the years that you graduated college unless you're a recent college graduate. outside of that, you start kind of running into age discrimination. So you have to take the years off that you graduated, and then you really only have to highlight 10 to 15 years. That's it.
Okay.
A relevant experience. Your resume can be 2 pages. Stop like minimizing the font to make it 1. It's 2024, and like in moving forward.
Okay, so
that's
something that like the person I worked with, they told me to try to get it to 1 page. So I guess is that like you think 2?
What do you have?
2 pages?
Like, are you a recent grad with like 1 year of experience? No, like 2 pages. Like get it on 2. You don't squish the font. 11. You know,
how many bullet points per position? Like I know we're getting really detailed here, but like those are things that I think a lot of people have questions. Like I think at one point I had like for one position I had like 8 or 9 bullet points, and I just got it down to 5. Like, would you recommend that or like just?
I don't know. I mean, if 8 or 9 are exactly what you did, and it's super relevant, and it's like it's really just those are important skills, and they're what you can do at a company, at the next company, I would leave them. But if they're redundant, if it's a lot of soft skills, so there's, the art and the science. And so the science are going to be your hard skills, like the bank reconciliations and working in the general ledger. But the soft skill might be like dedicated, thorough, team player. If you're filling up your entire resume with a bunch of soft skills, we're not pulling up keywords on LinkedIn on soft skills. It's on hard skills.
Okay.
So you've got to really make sure that you're utilizing those hard skills. And so I would say keep your resume as simple, but also as detailed as you can. You can tailor your resume each time. You might not want to. A lot of people don't tailor their resumes. They don't have to tailor them because a lot of jobs are just the same. They're applying to just another complimentary maybe step up. So, you don't have to do that. But yeah, the whole different color pictures, all the different things, the ATS doesn't like it.
Okay. Which I think that's why I say the benefit of working with a headhunter if you're in the right position is because they're going to help you get into the right position so that you don't have to tailor your resume. Because if you're applying for a lot of different type of positions, I definitely think you should tailor your resume. But if you're only looking for accounting jobs, like you said, I mean, it's the standard thing as long as you're in the right industry. Because you told me like there's different accounting from nonprofit accounting and and
oil and gas accounting. Like there's all different ones. But like you just need to make sure that you're tailoring it the way that you need to. And like there's different titles too. A lot of times people are open-minded to applying to like say like an HR generalist position or an HR business partner. So then you would tailor your resume based off that. So different examples like that, but keep it simple. I think also too, job seekers, specifically in that professional career side, they definitely need to be partnering with headhunters, several of us.
Oh, really?
That are specialized. So you can't really depend on one, because one thing that I think is a myth and a lot of people don't understand headhunting, we don't find, like if you gave me your resume, I'm not finding you a job. Like I don't take your resume and then start going knocking on doors. That's not how it works. Companies come to us and they give us positions, and then we go into our pipeline and we see who we have for those roles.
Gotcha.
So a lot of people think that's how it works, but you don't pay me a check. Like you're not cutting me a check for me to go and do that for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The companies pay us.
Gotcha.
So we will market your background. Like if we have a real estate company that's looking for somebody with exactly your background, we will literally market you to them.
Right.
But it doesn't work in the way that people think.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think that was an expectation I had for the first time. I was like, oh, they're going to be pitching my resume or whatever, but it's like if they have a position, they get the position, they go look in their database, look for a role, they find one match.
That's right.
And go on to the next position. Okay.
That's right.
That's good to know. And I think along with that, you guys are also doing some coaching, helping you with the tweets and stuff. So I definitely think there's definitely value. I definitely see the value you're saying when you're talking about going with multiple, because you can get multiple different perspectives. Because you've said things that are different than like other headhunters I've worked with, and so now I'm like, okay, now I can compare the information and say, hey, what's most relevant to me, right? Because you might be your experience might be because of the niche that you're in, right? Which I definitely want to talk about here in a sec. So definitely understanding that if you have a niche specific headhunter, like I wouldn't recommend going with like somebody who's a generalist. Like I would go with a specialist, because they have special relationships, right?
You nailed it too, because it's like if you're looking for like an accounting job and you're partnering with a recruiter that specializes in engineering, how helpful is that?
Yeah.
Like you really have to find your people.
Okay.
And there's headhunters for everybody.
And so so I know you work with like high earners, so like 6 figures and above. let's say I'm applying for entry level job that's, $60,000 a year. Should I still, is that still use a headhunter for that?
Yeah,
Or is that like, hey, that's
100%.
not really? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, because they're not, we all have our things that we specialize in. And so my niche is going to be like that mid to senior level and above. But other companies, and I've worked for those companies, they will take somebody that's entry level. They'll take someone with 3 to 5 years of experience and they'll help them find an opportunity. So yes, still work with a headhunter.
Okay, got you. Okay, so let's talk about the niche. So I just brought that up, and you have a very specific niche, and I super appreciate you because when we were talking about doing this episode, you were very cool, like, hey, this is who I serve. So obviously, we want to bring value to my audience, but this is who I would work with. So if I recommend anybody to you, so talk about the power of your niche. How did you find your niche? Why do you think the niche is so important? I think it's a buzzword in business. Everybody says, you know what I mean? And I don't know that everyone really just gets the value. So I want to just hear from you firsthand experience what it means for you.
So, well, there are riches and niches. Like you have to niche down to be able to make money. So I chose accounting, finance, and HR because that's all that I've done. I've headhunted for 12 years. And so my first job was in HR, like recruiting. And then my second job was all accounting, and that's all I've ever done since. So I speak the language. So that's not my personal background. I'm not an accountant by trade or an HR person by trade, but you learn the skills, you learn the language by talking to those folks, talking to the hiring managers in those space, learning what they do, learning the kind of roles that they hire for. After you've had a dozen of those conversations, you speak the language fluently. So that was easy for me to pick that because I'm really good at this. And also too, my market here is Houston. I don't break out of Houston. That is it. And a lot of people will give me unsolicited business advice. I'll be like, oh my gosh, you're leaving so much money on the table. Do you realize if you worked nationally, how much more money that you can make? It's like, do you realize how big Houston is? Houston is huge. And the industry that I'm also specialized in is oil and gas and manufacturing. So I'm home. This is great.
That's it.
Yeah. So I don't have to go anywhere else. So I think that it's really important that if you're, in any kind of business, and I think there's multiple studies on this too that have been shared with me actually by my executive coach recently. The more you niche down, the more money you actually make. You can double, triple your revenue by really being the specialized, like the subject matter expert really in your market for whatever it is that you're selling. So that's my advice too, is that even, for some people that started their firms right around when I did, because I think a lot of us found ourselves in that situation where we were, laid off, and what can we do? Let's start our own company. So I actually knew quite a few people that alongside me started their own companies in Florida and, Ohio, San Antonio, Dallas, and they're not in business right now.
Wow.
And they went back and they started working for agency back in corporate. And what they had all shared with me was, Sarah, I wish that I would have done what you did and actually stuck with my niche.
Got it.
And if I'd done that, this is all separately. If they felt like if they had done that, they'd still be in business. So I think there's something to be said about that. Like you have to really stick to your guns and build your brand and build your network based on the niche.
I love that. That's so good. You mentioned Houston, so obviously dominated by oil and gas manufacturing. Is the Houston job market stronger than the rest of the country? I definitely know on the real estate perspective, we have a more stable real estate economy here because of the jobs, right? Because we do have a stronger job market than other parts of the country. So with that, do you see that those are still Houston still a good place to find a good high paying job?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Houston's great. That's what attracted me to move here. I'm originally from Boston. And so when Houston picked me up, I came here because of the opportunity. There's every industry, it exists here. There's opportunities for anybody. Outside of oil and gas and manufacturing, which is huge, we have medical, which is really big. Construction is huge here. Engineering firms, architecture is here. Investment banking. There's just so much here that there's no real reason why, it's a great reason why we see all these people moving here.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the last how many years now, we've been having tons of people from California come on over and everything. It's not just because it's cheaper to live here, which is really not that cheap anymore to live here. So stop coming here. But it's because of all the opportunity. Houston, I love for that simple fact is if whatever you want is here, just go find it.
Okay, so good. Okay, so I have one question for you that I kind of I'm starting to ask more on the podcast, right? Because the goal of this podcast is to help people grow their faith and their income, right? And so I want people to be able to be all that God has called them to be your best in every area, right? And the two that are most relevant to me is making money and my faith, right? So any entrepreneur, business owners, y'all are clapping your hands, we know. But even if you're looking, like you said, we talked about earlier, you're looking for a job, leveling up to that next position, right? We're all thinking about how we can make ends meet, how we can provide for our families, how we can live the life we want, right? And so that takes resources. And I think your spiritual resources are sometimes more even beneficial than your financial resources. So talk about like how your faith impacts your business in whatever capacity that is.
I mean, it just does. So, I was raised in Boston, so obviously I'm an Irish Catholic.
Okay.
So I was raised in a family, like we went to church, and I think out of, I have two sisters, and out of my two sisters, I am definitely the most religious. And I've always had the fear of God in me. And so for me, even as I was a younger kid, I always wanted to do the right thing, right? All the time.
Right. Are you the oldest?
No, I'm the middle.
Okay, interesting. That's an interesting perspective for a middle child.
Yeah, always. I was always scared God would see, and I'd be like, I'm sorry, God. Like, and I think that's a little bit of the Catholic in me that did that, but I'm still like that as an adult woman. And so, for me, I still practice my faith, but I think that the biggest piece here when it comes to success is when you talk to the most successful people, and when they give speeches and you hear them talk, they always mention God.
Yeah. They
always say, I have faith. The most successful people have faith. They just do. Even walking into this podcast, I prayed in the car. It's like, God, please help guide and lead me through your words. Like, talk. It's just something that, I lean on because it helps me feel like taken care of. It helps me feel like seen. And it reminds me that I'm doing this for a lot of reasons that are much bigger than what most people do these things for. You know, in the business that I'm in, I want to help people truly, and I want to help them to get through whatever it is. I had somebody text me this morning, and she's like, I just need you to give me some faith because I'm losing it. And it's because she's been looking for a job for the last 6 months, and it's just really hard for people. And so, a lot of people need someone to give them that, to give them, some kind of peace of mind. And even myself, I have to do that. But I start my morning every single day with the same prayer. I actually wrote my prayer, and it was based off of a prayer that Dolly Parton says.
Okay.
But basically, I start my morning every single day with just thanking God for giving me last night's rest and giving me this new day. And I ask him to help keep all the people out of my life that are not supposed to be in my life, and keep the door open for the right people.
Wow.
And
that's so good.
I think it's really important too, because I remind myself a lot of that as a business owner, that I say that prayer every single day. And I've been saying that prayer every single day for years.
Okay.
Because as you know, owning a business, a lot of people do walk out of your life. A lot of the time, like, your circle that was once really big now becomes really, really small. And when you're going through what it takes to really do this business, you can go through moments of feeling lonely. And so I do lean on my faith with that a lot too, because I'm like, God, I asked you for this. I asked you to close the door and keep the people out of my life that aren't supposed to be here. But I've actually recently come to, a different way of thinking about that, where I'm like, you know what? I don't think it's so much that it's lonely. I think it's actually lonelier being surrounded by the wrong people.
Ooh. That's good.
So that's where I'm at right now with it. But faith is so important. You have to have some kind of faith if you're in business. And it doesn't have to be faith in God. It could be just faith in a higher power, faith in, whatever energy you're going for. But having it and not having it, there's a distinct difference between where you will get in life.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, and I think it goes back to, like, we talked earlier about your identity and being able to know who you are. And I think for so many people, that faith is the grounding piece that you have to go to, because, like, the reality is we're human. So you're gonna go through challenges. You're gonna go through success, and you're gonna be like in the at the top of the mountaintop and just feeling all the emotions. And then I did it, right? And even in that, like, you can sometimes like lose it. Like, hey, where's my base? And so for me, I'm like, that faith is always that baseline that you can like derive your energy, your source of identity from. And for me, like, I don't necessarily. I think some people take it to the extreme where I don't want to name any names, but there's just certain political sects where there's like people that are driving identity from or in a religious aspect.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, that's not your actually identity. That's supposed to be a source of inspiration and, and faith, but it's not supposed to be your whole identity, right?
100%.
And so I think definitely we have to be careful. Like we can't go to the extreme with our faith where it overwhelms everything. But I think it should be a staple part of who we are. And so I talked earlier about me being a lighthouse. And so for me, I was like, okay, Lord, I need you to power the lighthouse. Because if I power it with my own strength and my own stuff, I'm going to run out, right? Yeah. Or I'm going to start pointing light at the wrong direction, right? So I'm like, hey, I need the Lord to kind of power the engine a little bit. And so I think for a lot of people, I think that's another, I'm a very visual person, so I always try to come up with like metaphors. And so like, think about like what's powering your lighthouse, like what's powering the light. Because like you said earlier, it could be lonely if you're in the wrong room. So if you're getting powered by the wrong source, like you're going to feel it and you know it. Like you know deep down when you're not powered by the right thing, right? And that's why so many people experience faith, have these spiritual experiences because they tap into like a new source of life. Yep. And like, ooh, that was really good, right? Yep. And then but then again, it's so easy to just get distracted again because then we get into life and you're like, oh wait, I found this other thing that feels just as good, and then you realize, oh wait, that's not actually that good. Like, you know what I mean?
I know. Yeah. And there's something to be said too about like that whole saying with like you are the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with the most, and you have to be very careful with who you surround yourself with, and you have to also be mindful of who you're taking advice from. Mm-hmm. Like, are you going to people and taking advice from people that aren't as successful, or they're not even trying to do certain things with their life? And, why would you go to them for advice? They're going to, for instance, I asked somebody recently for some advice, and it was a business question, which, she was there, I was asking what her opinion was, and she looked at me and she said, well, I mean, does it really matter? Don't you have enough? And I'm like, so she thinks I have enough, and she's making that decision to minimize me as I'm talking to her. And I realized in that moment, like, okay, this is exactly why you don't go to people with any kind of advice that you need that are not actually either, trying to get to a higher level and whatever that is, or they're, they've surpassed you. I've found myself too, when I go to people that are actually incredibly successful, asking them for advice, they're willing to give you advice. They're really willing to help you out and to make sure that you are leveling up 100%. They're not minimizing you.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're talking money, and they're comfortable talking it, and they're comfortable telling you where you need to work on, improving, and they're not at all trying to dim your light.
Right. Actually, and especially if you have the right vibrations, the right energy, which I think gets, again, you can vibrate the same frequency as certain people based off of shared values, shared spirituality. Like a lot of the people on my podcast, like I just connect with them, and it's like an instant connection. I'm like, how did this happen? Like, how did we I feel like me and you have very parallel lives. Like we're wearing the same colors. Like we just have a lot of similarities.
We live in like that kind of like the same neighborhood. Yeah, I was like, what is this? I just met you. I was like, how did I not meet you before?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just the energy, right? And I totally believe in it. I don't have to sound like too like hyper spiritual, but I definitely believe in energy and vibrations, and like I think God has put that stuff in place. So okay, so I got a new segment on the podcast. It's technically not new at this point. We've done it like 4 times, so I guess I need to stop saying it's new, but we have a segment on the podcast, and I asked these questions, and it's from this game on TikTok that I found, and basically I'm going to give you 3 questions, and you get to pick the one that you want to answer. And the rule is I have to answer the question as well. And so these are like tougher questions. I asked you a lot of really good questions that you already know the answers to because you do it every day. This is a tough question, right? Yeah. So it might not be. We'll see. So question number 1 is, how would you spend your last day on Earth? So I'm going to give you that one. Okay. You can look at it. Why do you think people seek validation from others? That's one. And then tell me about a moment you truly felt alive.
Okay. So I get to choose which one? Just one. So, okay, I'll talk about a moment when I truly felt alive. Okay, because I think about this a lot. And this moment, actually, when I'm really stressed out, I put myself back in that moment. So, back in 2019, I took a trip to Bali with my husband, and him and I had 2 different ideas of that trip. Okay. And we he really doesn't like to move off of like a resort, and I really want to experience the culture. I'm that person. And so I remember being there, and he would sleep in and I would be up really early, and the time difference is significant.
Yeah.
Totally different side of the world. So
Okay.
you're really off when you're there. But there was a moment where I got up and the sun wasn't up yet. It was so early, but I got myself up, got myself dressed, grabbed a book, and went and sat at the beach. And I was sitting there for about, I'm not going to lie, like 2 hours before sunrise.
Yeah.
And I was just having a moment with me for 2 hours. It was quiet. No one was there.
Wow.
It was still pretty dark. And then I actually watched the sunrise all by myself in Bali. And it was so awesome and amazing. And honestly, like, it changed everything. Like, I felt like a person. I felt like I was actually significant. It was weird. I don't know if I needed it because maybe I was lacking something inside of me in that moment, but it changed me in that moment. And it's funny, I tried to duplicate that moment recently because it just felt so good.
Yeah.
I was in Portugal last month and I was in the Algarve, and so our resort was actually on the beach, and I got up and was like, I'm going to do this. I want to do this over. And the sun did not rise because it's all cliffs in the Algarve. So I'm like, wait in there, and it's getting brighter. I'm like, where's the sun? And I didn't see the sun rise. I just saw it getting brighter until I walked up the mountain. I'm like, oh, there's the sun.
Gotcha.
But I didn't get to actually redo it or recapture it in my brain the way that moment felt.
Okay.
It was beautiful.
Man, that's awesome. I love that. I can like totally visualize that, and I think that's incredible. That I feel like that's like almost like a commercial. Like, you know, you see the commercial, somebody sitting on a beach like reading a book or something. Like, that feels amazing. Like,
it was awesome. And I remember sitting there wondering why no one else was doing that.
Yeah.
Like, I was alone. Nobody else wanted to watch the sunrise in Bali. It's like, when am I ever going to get a chance to do this again? Am I ever going to come back? I would love to, but when would that happen? So I took full advantage and just thought, man, everyone that's sleeping in right now is totally missing something magical.
Wow. Man, that's so good. I love that you got to experience that with yourself.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about identity through this whole thing, and so that's just like this moment where you got to experience something that you truly enjoyed for yourself.
Yeah.
I think the answer that I would give, like, I have such a hard time answering like just like the one moment, right? I'm like, oh my god, what is the one moment? I've had so many. So like, I'm gonna since I'm the host, I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I'm gonna give a season that was like that truly felt alive. And it was the summer of 2016. I had just graduated from college, and I played football at Mary and Baylor. And so, like, when I was in college, like, I basically had football as my full-time job. So I didn't get to, like, have fun like most college kids do, right? Like, we were just in football almost year-round. When I wasn't in football, I was training or working or whatever. So the summer afterward, I graduated, dude, I went crazy. Like, I just did all the stuff that I wanted to do. I bought a GoPro, and then me and a buddy went and just did all of the, like, watering holes and cliff jumping around, like, Texas.
That's amazing.
And I'm actually going to link it in the description because I want y'all to see. I have another YouTube channel that has all those videos. They're all super cringy. Like, we filmed it with the GoPro, edited. Yeah. But they're actually really fun. You're going to learn a lot about me from some of those videos, so I'm going to link it. But that was, like, I truly felt alive because we were, like, jumping off 70-foot cliffs. We were jumping into, I don't know if you've heard of Jacob's Well, which is, like, in Wimberley. But it's, like, this super deep well, and it's, like, clear. So you can see all the way down to the bottom. It's super dangerous. People go in there and die all the time. So, like, don't go in there.
That's where you chose?
Yeah, that's where we were going. Yeah, like, so the people who get in trouble were, like, like dive down into it, and they do these, like, cliffs or caves down there. So we were just jumping in the top. But it was just, like, just so thrilling to just go and just, like, just have fun, right? And just travel across the state with a buddy of mine and capture it. And that was kind of the start of my content journey. That's when I realized I really loved making content because we were, like, editing all the videos. So we would stay up until, like, 4 a.m. editing our video from that day and just, like, really fun stuff. So that's what I was saying.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. And the fact, too, they say that. It's like, when I got asked this question, like, when is the last time you stayed up, like, way past when you were supposed to because you just loved something that you were doing so much?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's my job every day. I mean, my husband last night was like, are you coming to bed? And I'm just like, I'm busy. You know, like, because you get obsessed with this kind of stuff. I think that's beautiful.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming on to this episode. This was so good. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing such good tips. I really hope someone's able to get some value out of that.
I hope so.
If you have more questions for Sarah, we'll put her information in the description. Again, she is very niche. So if you're I'll let you tell them kind of who you work for, and that way they can know if they should reach out to you or not.
You've got to be here in Houston, Texas, first and foremost, and you have to be in accounting, finance, or human resources, and that mid to senior level and above. Yeah. I am happy to give tips to anyone that is outside of Houston or maybe not exactly in my niche. But as far as partnering together, I really am specialized.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.